We have an interesting show for you today. Within the last couple of years, I did a report on genetically modified mosquitoes being released by the hundreds of millions in Florida and Texas because the EPA and the CDC think it's a good idea. And according to nature.com, they had a successful campaign. Yet according to the article, larger tests are still needed to determine whether the insects can achieve the ultimate goal. We'll talk about it. I just saw this article in the news that Florida and Texas have malaria resurfacing for the first time in a long time. I'm not saying the two are related, I just find it fascinating and I want to talk about it. And the second story is about Roseanne Barr and the attempt to cancel her from groups like the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, and others because of a sarcastic Holocaust joke that she made. Roseanne just got back to the podcasting circuit and they're trying to cancel her before she barely got started. We'll talk about it and I'll let you know what I think. God bless you guys. Dream Rare Podcast starts now.
It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of the Dream Rare Podcast. I have two stories. I hope you stay tuned for the second one. We're going to talk about Roseanne, but the first one is a follow-up on Texas and Florida because a couple years ago, within the last 2 years, I reported that they were releasing hundreds of millions of genetically modified mosquitoes in Texas and Florida to curb new outbreak of disease and to try to lower the population of mosquitoes. So just personally, I was like, let me keep an eye on Texas and Florida for a few years and see what happens. And recently, I just saw those two states pop up, and it was Texas and Florida have now been found with malaria for the first time in a few decades. I'm going to play my Instagram reel I made about it to explain it, but I want to say I understand that causation doesn't equal correlation, and these two things, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're related. I just found it fascinating, and I have a few angles that are interesting if I'm still allowed to report the news and do journalism. I don't know. Every time I do stuff like this, it tends to be stuff that they censor, but I don't care. I got to do my job. So here's the video, and then we'll talk about it. Fact, they released hundreds of millions of GMO mosquitoes in the last couple years in Texas and Florida, apparently to try to lower and control the mosquito population. Where did they do this? In Florida and Texas. Fact, the media is now reporting that the first cases of malaria in decades are being reported in Florida and Texas. I'm not saying causation equals correlation. I'm not saying that this means anything. I'm sure everything that our government and GMO mosquito groups are doing is safe and effective, of course. But it is fascinating to see these two news stories. And if you look further, the same foundation and the same guy that funded the GMO mosquitoes is also funding multiple ways to counter malaria. I'm not saying anything nefarious is at play, but there's a chance they censor this video for simply reporting on this type of information. Check the links in my bio to follow me on other social media with less censorship. So while people were fighting over Trump and Biden and, the election, and I'm not saying you shouldn't talk about the election, don't get it twisted. I'm just saying, like, as the narrative was being controlled by people on both sides, and there was like, Hunter Biden's laptop, not saying it's not important. I'm just saying, as everybody's been running in the circle around the same five topics for years, a couple of years ago, quietly, the EPA and the CDC decided that it was a good idea to release hundreds of millions of GMO mosquitoes into Florida and Texas. So let me get into the story. So why did they do it? According to the CDC on their official website, it says release of genetically modified mosquitoes is not intended to stop an ongoing disease outbreak. Instead, genetically modified mosquitoes are meant to help prevent disease outbreaks. Releasing genetically modified mosquitoes over several months can reduce the number of specific mosquito species such as A.E. aegypti. So they released them and said, we're not releasing hundreds of millions of GMO, genetically modified mosquitoes, into Florida and Texas to stop outbreaks we have now or to stop diseases we have now, but to prevent other ones in the future. And then just 2 years later, within 2 years, there's malaria for the first time in a long time in those exact states. I'm not saying that's what caused it, but you have to ask yourself, is this a successful launch? Did the CDC succeed in what they were trying to do, preventing disease outbreaks? I'm sure they'll say they did. I'm sure they'll say that it could have been worse or something worse would have happened. But I'm just going to read a quick report from nature.com. Nature.com said, biotech firm announces results from first U.S. trial of genetically modified mosquitoes. Their name is Oxitec. and they reported that the insects behaved as planned, but a larger trial is still needed to learn whether they can reduce wild mosquito populations. Researchers have completed the first open-air study of genetically engineered mosquitoes in the United States. The results, according to the biotechnology firm running the experiment, are positive, but larger tests are still needed to determine whether the insects can achieve the ultimate goal of suppressing a wild population of potentially virus-carrying mosquitoes. So they're saying it was a success, but we need to do it more in order to find out more about whether we succeeded truly on our full plan or not. So a few angles of this. First of all, genetically modified mosquitoes. They released hundreds of millions in Texas and Florida. I understand that the EPA and the CDC have it all under control. Someone said, "Well, I didn't expect a live today." Well, I'm here. Welcome. But people, they'll say, "No, it's safe and effective. We're the CDC, we're the EPA. We wouldn't release hundreds of millions of genetically modified mosquitoes into the wild if it weren't." Of course it is. But here's my thing. It's the same thing as the COVID vaccine in the sense of you can do trials with 1,000, 2,000 people, but once you do it to hundreds of millions of people, this is a new trial. You're releasing hundreds of millions of genetically modified mosquitoes into the wild. I mean, am I supposed to think that nothing could possibly go wrong? Like, is that the take that I'm supposed to have if I worked at CNN or MSNBC or one of the lames at Fox News who wasn't someone like a Tucker? Like, am I just supposed to say, yeah, no, for sure, we can play God and modify genetically a mosquito and release hundreds of millions of them into the wild, and it's got to work without success? There's no possible way that anything bad could go wrong because that's just the settled science. Like, is that what they want me to think? Because I don't think that, but I could pretend to if that makes some people feel better. But yeah, I don't believe that. Do I think that's where malaria came from? I have no idea. I'm not suggesting that. There's some people in my comment section on Instagram saying anomaly, another way that diseases could get here is they're letting tens of millions of people over time across the southern border. Millions of people are coming across. And as we know in America, we're getting tested. We have vaccine passports. I mean, they did the most insane, totalitarian, authoritarian health policies for American citizens, but for illegals and for people that come across the border, it seemed like they weren't testing as much, and they didn't care about the vaccine passport. They were letting people across. So there's some speculation that people are saying because our border is so wide open that diseases could pour in through there. And I mean, they're not necessarily wrong. I'm not afraid of other people per se, but other countries have problems America doesn't have. So it's common sense. If you let millions of people from Africa, South America, all over, unvetted, untested, like a normal entry, if you just let them across and give them whatever they call it, shelter or refuge, that's also a possibility. I mean, I don't know. It could have naturally occurred and come back. I don't want to suggest things I don't know. I like to run an accurate podcast, but here's a few things that I will say before I move on to the Roseanne story. I just want to make a few points. First of all, this is a fact. They released hundreds of millions of genetically modified mosquitoes, and the two states they were targeting were Texas and Florida, because I'm guessing there's a lot of mosquitoes there, or at least that's what they'll say. Yes, now malaria seems to be back. There's cases in Florida and Texas. Interesting. Also, what's interesting is there's a man, I guess you guys could guess who it is. I'm just going to not say the name. I know I shouldn't censor myself. I'll just say it's Bill Gates, okay? I know it's like anytime I say his name, they like delete the video or they try to act like they fact check it. It's like a big thing that they do. But anyway, Bill Gates and his foundation, they funded the GMO mosquito Oxitec thing. That you could Google that. Bill Gates, Oxitec, GMO mosquitoes. He was involved somehow in the funding of that, right? When you move to the next topic, I'm just saying you could Google malaria, Bill and Melinda Gates, and you could find multiple articles. They are investing in a malaria vaccine, or funding it to some extent. There are more recent articles saying there isn't going to be a malaria vaccine, but there's other cures for malaria, and Bill Gates is funding that also. I'm just saying, on one hand, there's going to be people that say he's a tech genius, he's a wizard, and he's saving the world from disease with his vaccines and his genetically modified mosquitoes and his malaria cures. Others are not such big fans of his, including people that were terrorized by vaccine passports who wanted to opt out of mandatory injections. I think, people pushing that stuff without the compassion of saying, if you don't want it, leave those people alone. They've made a lot of people not like them for obvious reasons. So I'm not I don't know what's going on. I can't really tell you. I think there's multiple options here, but this is what I will say is the track record, just like with Pfizer before the pandemic, people like Ben Shapiro will say, and no disrespect, the guy does some great work. You know, he runs a nice company. There's good people there. But Ben Shapiro put out this video after he realized his error with his COVID vaccine, reporting, and he said, basically without saying sorry, he said sorry. And Ben Shapiro's excuse was like, I got lied to. It's not my fault. I'm Ben Shapiro. I'm a news analyst and I made a mistake. It's everybody makes mistakes. But like, I didn't know because like I didn't think that the government would lie to us. I didn't think that big pharma would lie to us. And while that's cute and it sounds nice, and Ben wore like a little jean jacket or whatever, like he's trying to look edgy like a motorcyclist or whatever, like that's his new style, unshaven jean jacket, whatever. I've gone through some bad phases with my hair, my facial hair. I'm just joking. But anyway, it's like, wow, that's a nice little excuse of like, oh, I just didn't know. What I would say to Ben Shapiro and others was the evidence was there. If you look at one of the biggest fines in modern history when it comes to anything, you could just look at the Pfizer criminal fine that they paid or the settlement that they did. The evidence is there of the history of corruption in the CDC. The evidence is there of the pay-to-play scheme going on in many cases. The evidence is there of the revolving door in government. And this idea that these are just like new topics that there's no way Ben Shapiro would have known, it goes against the reality of how this industry has worked for 40, 50 years. There's a lot of great products. There's a lot of great medicine. I'm so grateful for certain elements of Western medicine. God is great. Some of these companies make great products, but that doesn't mean everything they do is great and you shouldn't be able to question it. Like that's where the line is being crossed now. It's like everything we do is awesome. And if you disagree with it, you're a conspiracy theorist that needs to be banned and we'll have all social media to protect for you. I mean, that's bad news. When it comes to genetically modified mosquitoes, I'm not saying it didn't work. I have no idea. This is way above my pay grade. This is way above my understanding. If I really wanted to understand, I mean, I've read lots of articles on it, but I wasn't in the lab seeing exactly what they were doing. So let's just be honest. I mean, I don't know whether it was a success or not. And I could sit here and pretend like it wasn't, and I could lie to you like some, truthers would do and act like they're so sure. I really like to tell the truth. I don't know what's going on, but what I do know is when you release hundreds of millions of genetically modified mosquitoes, I doubt that the percentage chance of it, going wrong is zero. Like no? Is that how science works? It just works how they say it works. And it's just as safe and effective as they say it is. I mean, we already saw that that's not true. When it came to the efficacy of COVID vaccines, I'm not saying it did nothing, but when Rochelle Walensky, Joe Biden, Rachel Maddow came out and said this efficacy in these trials was this, everyone knows it wasn't that. And even they admit it wasn't that now, but they won't admit error. That's just the best they could do at the time, they say. But that's the efficacy, safe and effective. It wasn't as effective as they said at the beginning. That's now a fact. Rachel Maddow, Joe Biden, all their claims of that data or those study cases ended up not matching the reality of the massive study, which was hundreds of millions of people actually getting it. So all I'm saying is there needs to be able to be a conversation being had about this type of stuff, because or else we live in medical authoritarianism world, which we saw from 2020 to 2022, and some of it's still going on now. That's not acceptable. And thank God there's a lot of people like even the Rogans and the Kennedys of the world. You might not like them, but at least they're starting to bring this conversation forward. And I have to say this about politics before I move to the next topic. I know people get so mad at me on my show, and I understand why. There's so much emotion between Trump and Biden. And like, I get it. DeSantis, and oh my gosh, he's a rhino. And, everybody wants to fight over this stuff. But guess what? The FDA doesn't care if you fight over Trump and Biden, because they're not going to drain that swamp. Trump filled up the HHS and the FDA swamp. He's not going to do anything about it. I know that hurts people's feelings because they want to live vicariously through him and think, but I'm not saying he's a bad guy. This has been happening for decades. It's just if you run around these false paradigms of Trump versus Biden and Trump versus DeSantis, you're never going to realize that the EPA and the FDA and the CDC, they don't care. You think the EPA cares if Donald Trump wins? They don't care. You think the FDA cares if Donald Trump? Why would they care? He put Scott Gottlieb at FDA. Why would they feel like Trump's a threat when he put a pharmacy executive lobbyist from Eli Lilly above Fauci at the HHS? That's the truth. That's what he did. That's a fact. So I know people don't want to hear it because it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. Well, then just run around Hunter Biden's laptop and Don Jr. and, Iran, the classified documents, and Trump's the victim and he's the hero and he's the whatever. It's WWE theater for the masses so they can release hundreds of millions of genetically modified mosquitoes in Texas and Florida. And I guarantee you that most people in Texas and Florida didn't vote on that. Did you vote on that? Do you live in Texas? Did you vote on that? Would you want that? Did you even have a say? Did Governor Abbott talk about it? Did Ron DeSantis talk about it? Did Trump talk about it? Is anyone talking about it besides RFK Jr., who's tweeted about it? No one else is talking about it. So I'm not saying they're necessarily bad people and you could vote for who you want to vote for, but a lot of politics is just taking your eyes away from the prize, taking your energy into a theater that doesn't matter. You'll waste 3 years defending Trump from Russia collusion or the laptop. And then when it's all said and done, these type of industries just keep moving with their revolving door policy and they're never going to stop. So God bless America. I want to say this too real quick before I leave, because I'm very passionate about this topic. If you haven't noticed, McDonald's is an American company. It's one of the great American companies that's succeeded all over the world. Why is a McDonald's hamburger less healthy in America than it is in Europe or Japan? How disgraceful have we become of a nation to our own people that our own product is better and healthier in other countries than it is in America? That's disgraceful, but that's the truth, because the dough conditioner they use in America, they wouldn't use in Europe because they don't hate their people there as much as we hate our people here, or they're not trying to make a buck off you. So there's so many disgusting, evil things going on in this country that could be easily tweaked if we just had somewhat standards and self-care, but we don't. And that's why Trump is a character, Biden's a character. Pick one. You're going to get some judges or some speeches, and you might get, Amy Coney Barrett or whatever, and there's going to be a difference. I vote. I'm just saying, there's some things that'll never change, and they hope you never notice, and they hope you fight over Trump and DeSantis, and they hope you fight over Trump and Biden, because the two leading candidates in the election are Trump and Biden, and both of them didn't do anything about the pharma swamp. They both were in on the 2020 situation and the 2021 situation, and they're the leading candidates. What message does that send of America the sheep that they're going to vote for the two people that were just in on one of the craziest things that's ever happened in modern history that showed the corruption of the government and big pharma when they collaborate? So, if people act like sheep, they're going to get treated like sheep. I don't care who you vote for, but please pay attention and don't buy into the Hegelian dialectic, like false paradigm of politics so much. Pick your guy, fight your fights. But, I'm telling you, this stuff is not going to change under Trump or Biden. It probably won't change under DeSantis. It might change under RFK. It might change under, these things may or may not happen, but keep your eyes on the prize, because there's nothing more important than the food that we eat, the water that we drink, the air that we breathe, and our environment. And I'm not necessarily saying that this mosquito experiment failed. And I'm not necessarily saying malaria came for this reason or this reason. I have no idea. It could be from open borders, and we're bringing in people from countries without testing them the same way they test you if you came to this country legally. So there's a million, and it could be natural. There is natural cycles of certain illnesses and stuff. I'm not making a false claim that I can't prove. I'm just saying, please, for the love of God and for the love of this country, pay attention, or else we're going to keep getting scammed on loop, and we're going to keep getting censored on loop, and we're not going to accomplish that much. So I hope that we do. Appreciate you guys. And I'm going to run an ad real quick because, a lot of people do not want to sponsor me, and the people that do, I don't like, and I think are unethical and just whack. They have whack products. So this is one of the only ones I've been doing, and I'll show you real quick. It's gold and silver. It's the largest retail gold and silver dealer in America. It's American Hartford Gold. They believe in me. I believe in them. They'll ship gold and silver to your door. It's pretty easy stuff. They'll do buyback, free shipping, free insurance, tax-free transaction. It's 844-399-2448. That's 844-399-2448, or text DREAM, 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 to 65532. That's text DREAM to 65532. If you've ever wanted to get gold or silver physically or in another way, you can even buy it without owning it, but they'll ship it right to your door. It's all simple. It's all real. They got a bunch of 5-star reviews, good Better Business Bureau ratings, etc. Check that number, check that text, give them a call. Straightforward stuff. I've always wanted to get gold and silver. I just don't know how. I don't really trust that many people. And if I do ever order anything, whether it's from Amazon or gold or silver, stuff like that, I always look for reviews because I'm not doing a 1 or 2 star review. They got great reviews everywhere you look. They deliver, they bring it to you. You can own physical gold or silver. Please check out American Hartford Gold. And I'm very, very grateful that they believe in me enough to even consider that, because you'd be shocked at how many people do not want to work with me. So American Hartford Gold, check it out. If you didn't get it, rewind for the number and all that. They got a lot of good stuff. They work with NASCAR. They are the official gold and experts on Newsmax. American Hartford Gold. All right, the next story, on that note, I'll get myself in trouble real quick, but Roseanne Barr just came back to podcasting. Obviously, she got her show canceled because why did Roseanne get canceled the first time again? Oh, yeah, she made a comment about Valerie Jarrett that was considered quote unquote racist. Anyway, she just started a podcast and she's just like resurfacing, and she's already almost getting canceled again by the Anti-Defamation League, which is a left-wing Jewish organization that's calling her anti-Semitic, despite the fact that Roseanne is obviously Jewish and she's like super proud and super outspoken, and she's in no way like she's very, I'm like, she's very Jewish. They'll say that's anti-Semitic, but she would even say it herself. Like, she's not one of these like self-hating left-wing Jews that like cries and, feels bad for their ethnicity. Like, she's not against Jewish people or anything like that. But because she made a sarcastic joke, she was talking about, I watched the whole clip. It's a little confusing because sarcasm can be confusing, but she's like saying that the election was super real because you can't say the opposite on YouTube. So she was being sarcastic, being like, oh, Joe Biden, blah, blah, blah. And then she talked about the Holocaust and said the opposite of what she believes in sarcasm about, I guess a joke about the Holocaust is like one of the things you're not supposed to do. You're not really supposed to do anything with the Holocaust. You're not really supposed to like question it or joke about it or really speak, like, unless you're like on your knees, like, like you're like, oh my gosh, you're not really supposed to talk about it. It's like a very sensitive subject, obviously. And it's not to be joked about or questioned at all. Even if you're Jewish, like Roseanne, they will get upset. And by they, I mean the Anti-Defamation League and others. I saw Jonathan Greenblatt, who was tweeting that it was so bad and, it shouldn't be done. And Theo Vaughn should have pushed back. And I think of I'm trying to think of his name. It wasn't Cedric. Shoot. Oh, Patrice O'Neal. I don't know if you guys know Patrice O'Neal. He passed recently. He's so funny. He used to do hits on Fox News and stuff. And Patrice O'Neal used to say, unfunny people should not be making rules for funny people. That was his whole thing. He's like, I'm funny. He was defending Don Imus in that whole scandal because he's like, listen, Don Imus is a funny guy. He said something, and now you're going to say that I can't say that, but I want to say I'm black, and you're censoring me now. So his whole thing was like, unfunny people shouldn't make rules for funny people. And that's what happens in this world. Roseanne is super funny. I'm definitely a little biased with this topic. I've met her. I've hung out with her. I have to say she's exactly who she seems like she would be. There's like no acting. It's not like Roseanne puts on this wild act and then goes and acts normal. Like, she's exactly who you think she is. She's just as funny as you think she is. Like, everything she says in real life is hilarious. She really is one of the funniest people out and one of the funniest comics of all time. And, in order to be funny and be loose, you just got to say whatever and go with the flow. And, sometimes your jokes hit, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it offends people, sometimes it doesn't. But that's part of comedy, especially when you don't mean malice by it. So I just think it's pretty wild that the Anti-Defamation League, a left-wing global Jewish organization, is trying to cancel a Jewish woman because she said something that they didn't like. It's like, I mean, they're really watering down the word anti-Semitism. A lot of people still want to wield that because it is a powerful word to censor opposition of, if you're critical of Israel, if you notice patterns, if you compliment people. It's a word to just shut down all conversations. Like, don't say this, don't say that, just don't say anything. Like, that's anti-Semitic and you shouldn't say it. But I feel like, I don't know if they're doing this purposely, but it's almost making it not mean anything. Like, if you can't wield that word with accuracy or even try to be accurate, and you're just like throwing it at everybody all the time, like you're gonna call Roseanne Barr anti-Semitic, you're making people not care about it anymore. Like, it's actually not going to help that agenda. I don't understand what they're doing with it. I don't think it's a smart idea, but that's what they want to do. They just want to constantly overuse that word a million times to shut down everything. On yesterday's podcast, I showed you that Zelensky was calling Putin like the next most anti-Semitic person besides Hitler. And I'm like, what did Putin say that was that anti-Semitic? And I look it up, and it's like he just said that Zelensky was a disgrace to the Jewish people. And I'm like, that's as bad as Hitler? Like when you exaggerate that much, you're only waking people up to the fact that, these are words of the censor and they're not always used authentically. Like, it doesn't help to exaggerate that much, but I guess that's what it is. And I've obviously noticed over the years that, if I disagree with certain policy or certain things, that all of a sudden that word just gets thrown at me. I mean, I have people that literally on the right, I have people that used to take pictures with me. They used to see me at protests and be like, oh my gosh, Anomaly, I'm a huge fan. And now they're out here smearing my name, calling me anti-Semitic, this and that. And it's like, what did I say? Because I'm against a bill that Ron DeSantis passed. It's like, if you vote against foreign aid to Israel, you're anti-Semitic. If you make a joke, you're anti-Semitic. If you say this or that, it's like the word is so overused, and they're so desperately trying to pass it through legislation now. And it's working because the Republican Party, actually Trump and DeSantis, by the way, they are pushing an exaggerated definition through legislation. Like, it's worth considering. I don't agree with it. And to the people that don't understand why it's so important, it's going to be used against you. It's going to be used against Jewish people. It's like, they're being very clear with their agenda. It's like Roseanne is a Jewish woman that's uncontrollable. Like, she's out of control in a good way. You get what I'm saying? Like, Roseanne can't be silenced. She can't be told what to say. She says whatever she wants. Like, you might like it, you might not. You might agree with it, you might disagree, but she's not this celebrity that's like so easy to tell what to do. And that's why they're using that word against her. Even though she's Jewish, even though she loves Israel, even though she's a proud Zionist, even though she's like very outspoken about how much she loves her people and herself, they still will use that word against her. Like, it doesn't make sense to most people. Like, why would they? How does it even make sense that they're using it against her if she supports this, this, and this? Because she's still loose and free, and she's still willing to say things that other people won't say. I remember her take on Ye when all that was going on, like earlier on. Her take was hilarious on him. Like, it wasn't generic, and it wasn't just like, I condemn it. She was like, oh, he's trying to be me. Like, I ran for president already in 2012. Like, her take was cool. She's a cool cucumber. She's one of a kind. And it's always lame people trying to tell cool people what they can and can't do. It's like, if you're not funny enough to do that, then like, how are you going to judge Roseanne? Everything she says is funny. You listen to her for an hour, she can just think of a joke like that. And then you got people that couldn't make you laugh if they had 15 joke writers being like, that's bad. It's like, dude, you've never said any. I've watched interviews with the ADL guy, Jonathan Greenblatt. He's not a comedian, but it's like, I've seen him, like, he's not as good of a public speaker as Roseanne. So at what point, like, why do you get to tell other people what to say? Like, if Michael Jordan came to me and said, you should shoot your basketball this way, I'd be like, all right, well, he knows what he's talking about. But if it's not your lane, then who cares? So long story short, I think Roseanne is one of those people that just doesn't give a shit. And like, her podcast is going to be wild. Like, she doesn't care. She doesn't have an off switch. They want her so bad. Like, even me, I don't have an off switch, but I see the game they're playing. I'm not made in the shade at this point. And also, I'm like, I get it. It's like, if I want to take this and I want to say something, maybe I'll try to partner with Rumble, or maybe I'll create a paywall, because that's just what it is. A lot of creators are going to rumble.com because Rumble allows them to say whatever. With Roseanne, she's not going to play that game. She's not going to silence herself. She's not going to like think about how she says it. She's just going to say it because that's what makes her great, and that's her style. And she'll get over this. Nowadays, it's not like it was 4 or 5 years ago. There's a lot of places that'll probably pay Roseanne if she wanted it, like Rumble. And you get what I'm saying? She has her own podcast. She could do what she wants. And I don't think this is going to affect her at all. If anything, I think it's going to wake people up to that word and how overused it is. Like, if you can't, I guess that's just what they do when you go too far. Like, for example, Kanye said like something about black people and slaves, even though he's black, but they freaked out about that. Do you remember that? That was before he even said anything like in the Jewish department. He said something about like, black people were slaves for this long. And he didn't say it was a choice. They kept saying he said slavery was a choice. He didn't say that. He said at a certain point, why did it last so long? It must, like, basically he was saying what Marcus Garvey said repackages, was in order to free your body, you need to free your mind. And that's the point that Ye was making when he said that. It's like, he's like, why were they stuck for that long? Because at a certain point there was a rebellion and they got out. He's like, if I was there, I would have got us out earlier. Like, it's a free man talking, walking. Like, that's his opinion. It's like, it was a great message in my opinion. But then you saw the whole media turn against Kanye. Even though he's black, they tried to say he was a racist because, how dare him say that slavery was a choice? Because the media uses certain things and certain victim narratives as an advantage. It's a super advantageous to be like, if we can keep making slavery movies, if we could keep, making them feel bad, if we can keep making them feel like this, there's an angle to it. So I think him just telling people to be free and buy land, this was years before his recent controversy. They were freaking out about that. Usually when you're black, you could say things about black culture more and not get in trouble. Because if you're white and you're saying something crazy about black culture, it's like, whoa, that's racist. But if you're black, it's like, oh, he's black. It's still a little messed up. But it's kind of like that with Jewish. It's like, if you're Jewish, you could say more, but like, you can't go like full, Holocaust joke like Roseanne went. Like, that's not going to cut it. But she can say more stuff maybe because of her ethnicity, but like not there. There's always like a limit where it's like, you can get away with that, but like not quite that. And then I guess if you're white, they just say everything that you say is racist. And like at birth, it's like they try to say you're like a terrible person until you like transition genders. And then now you're a victim and you could, march with Lockheed Martin and like Wells Fargo or something, or some banking. Like they're like, look, we're gay now. And it's like, yeah. Banks are. I saw a Federal Reserve gay march recently. I'm like, yo, are left wingers this like easy to trick? You just put a rainbow flag on the Federal Reserve, and liberals are like, yay, it's a pride march, dude. The pride thing is it's not funny because I know they're doing the kid stuff and it's really messed up. I'm sorry, like I have to make jokes or else my life and job is miserable. But like, it is low key funny that they're like just throwing rainbow flags on the Federal Reserve and like no one's even thinking about it. They're like, you want to go to a Federal Reserve rally? And people are like, no, why would I go to a Federal Reserve like rally? Like, what is that even like, or a Federal Reserve parade? And they're like, do you want to go to a pride parade sponsored by the Federal Reserve? And you're like, yeah, are there going to be rainbow flags there and like good times? It's like, yeah, well, like it's that easy to trick certain people. It's shocking. But back on topic, I think that these hands are getting overplayed. The left is going too far with that stuff, and they're going too young, and they're going too sexual too early, and parents are waking up. It's a natural pendulum swinging back. I think groups like the Anti-Defamation League, like they're just doing too much and policing too much, and people are getting annoyed, and it's getting to the point where now when they're outraged, people don't care that much. Like if you can't even reserve your outrage for somebody that actually hates the country, like people are hateful out there. I'm not one of them, but there are hateful people. Roseanne is not one of them. She doesn't hate Jews. She loves Jewish people. She loves Israel. And you're going to use that word against her? Like, it's only going to make millions of people who never thought about it be like, maybe that word is overused. It's like, yeah, of course it is. Like they wield it with just looseness. Like anybody who says anything is anti-Semitic. It's like, you can't even have the discipline to not use it against Roseanne. Like Roseanne is a staunch Israel supporter, but it's her too. But that's what they do. If you talk about George Soros, they'll call you that. If you question foreign aid, they'll talk about that. If you notice certain laws passing, they'll call you that. It's wild that, I don't know. It's just wild. And it's also wild that during the lockdowns and stuff, like the type of stuff that Israel was doing to their own people was shocking. And this is one thing that I'll say, and I know I don't have to say this, but I want to. I don't hate anybody, and I've never been hateful. And I find that the people who pander the most, whether it's left-wing organizations or Jewish groups or right-wing groups or any ethnic group or any religious group, whatever, the people that pander the most, they're not always the nicest people. Like, it doesn't mean that you're nice just because you pander. For example, all the right-wingers who pander so much to Israel, like the conservative movement is like attached at the hip to Israel. They were nowhere to be found when Israel was suffering. You get what I'm saying? Like, they'll talk about Palestine and they'll talk about the wall or whatever. But when the Israelis were having a vaccine passport, there were deals that were made that they could only travel to Bahrain if they were vaccinated. They could only go to certain places if they were vaccinated. Israel for a while had one of the strictest vaccine passports in the world. And all of a sudden, I'm one of the only accounts talking about it. And all these people, like, what was Mike Pompeo talking about? You get what I'm saying? Like, they'll do these, like, I love Israel for donors. They'll say, I love Israel for the television. But when it comes to actually love the people there and love good people all over the world, all of a sudden they're nowhere to be found. So it just makes me wonder, they act like I'm a bad person when I'm not. Like, how much do you really love people if you're only there for a donor meeting? And people will say that is like something negative too. It's true. I mean, you go to some of these right-wing events, it's like donors. They got this group, that group, this lobbying group, that lobbying group, this super PAC, that super PAC. That's what political people do. They speak in front of people and they make money. It's just like, that's how politics works with everything. But anyway, like, they do that. And then they wield the word the same way that ADL wields it against Roseanne. And they're like, everybody who says this is hate speech. This is hate speech. You're anti-Semitic. And then the Israeli people are getting vaccine passported. And all those people have nothing to say. It's like, I find it very disingenuous. I find that on the right, they use and exploit that for their own personal gain. And there's a lot of Christians doing it too. Don't get it twisted. They do that the same way the left kind of manipulates the gay thing and the Hispanic thing and, the black thing. Like, the same mentality that the left has, that they're like, okay, well, the George Floyd riot happened, so you have to vote for us, is the same game that the right plays in that category, in my opinion, where they use it for a virtue signal and they use it for, to show loyalty. But the true loyalty and true love doesn't come from a speech or from like a that person's doing hate speech. That's not real. It's not, and over time, I know there's always going to be smear attempts, but people like Roseanne will stand the test of time because she actually has talent. Like, whether you love her, hate her, like her political views or not, think she's mean or not, she's hilarious. Like, that's not even debatable. I mean, some people might not think she's funny, but I think she's one of the funniest people in the world. And I don't even think this cancel attempt's going to really do much. There's Rumble, there's podcasts, everybody's like burnt out from these things. It's like, wait, what are we mad at now? Wait, who said what? Like, I ignored it for a week because I was like, I don't even care. Like, I'm sure what she said wasn't that crazy, or it was sarcastic and they're taking it out of context. So is what it is. But, I always try to just show a little love when people are getting canceled. And I hope that they show love to me too, because there's obviously going to be times in anyone's life that's funny, talented, creative, unique, honest, truthful. There's going to be a time where the media comes after you and the media tries to make you look bad. And it's nice when good people all around the world of all types, have each other's back when stuff like that happens. So that's my take on that. Appreciate you guys. God bless you. Hope you enjoyed Dream Rare Podcast. And if you're just joining or you did, and you want to check out the number and the text for American Heart for Gold, I appreciate it. And I'm very grateful. You guys know I do 99.9% of my things with no sponsors. I make my own hats, etc. But it's nice to have someone to rock with, because that really helps me stay afloat as well. I just want to say this, like, I've been for decades now. I mean, since 2008. So for almost two years, two decades, I'm sorry, 15, 16 years. Sorry, I totally butchered that. But I've been producing content, making content, recording content. Most people don't work this hard. I'm getting kind of burnt out. I'm not going to stop or anything, but I take a break for like 3 days and people are like, are you okay? Are you okay? Do people realize that most people don't do this much work and they have a team of 30 people? Like, I take a 3-day break and people think something happened. I'm grateful. That means I work hard, but I've been doing this for 15, 16 years, doing every thumbnail, I'm exhausted. So it's nice to have people to partner with, because when Facebook or YouTube tries to do something, the more partnerships I have and the more income I could make other ways, the less they could cancel me. As much as it's like, I'm not trying to just be greedy. If they could suck away all your income, then, that could stop you and slow you down. So I'm grateful to have a sponsor. And I'm going to move forward on that note. God bless you. I'll be back. Dream Rare Podcast. We're out. Hey, what's going on, my friends? Just a few ways to stay in touch and support if you'd like to. The first way is Dream